Be careful, the bag we're making in this tutorial is quite addictive. Hi sewing friends, I'm Stephanie and this is Ashtown Creations. The bag that I'm wearing here is the small Louie Waist Pack from Creations. The first one I made was about 5-6 months ago. I made the medium size, this is the small, and I have made probably 6 or 7 of them since, and I have another 8 to 10 cut out of both between the medium and the small. I like pairing mine with the linen cotton canvas. This is usually leftovers from other bags that I have made, so it is a great scrap buster. And I like to pair mine with, this one is paired with cork. I'll just take it off. And then, so yeah, the back and the gusset and everything, the wings are all cork. And I like using a webbing for the strap. So there is not a lot of, there's no interior pockets in this one that we're making. I don't know on the small size if you could add it. You might be able to add credit card slots. There is a hack. I don't know if it's for the small or just the medium. On Creations website, in Tara's blog, she has a post on how to create card slots. I will attempt to do that in another, I'm going to try it first and then attempt to do it in another video. But for the small, it's not much inside. It's just a pocket, like a good place to put things. There's a double zip on it. So I found that quite handy when I was traveling, because you can, if you're wearing it on this side, you've got your zippers here where you can see it, not down here. You can switch sides. If you use the right zipper sliders, you could lock them if you wanted. I do put the D-ring on the side, and I use a plastic side release buckle. I do have metal ones, but I find they make a lot of noise, so I haven't used them yet. And on the back of it has a zipper. Now my iPhone is too large to fit in this one, but it fits perfectly in the medium size. So this is a great pouch. It's great for traveling or hiking, or just if you're going out to, let's say you're going to a market to just shop around and you want to have your hands free. This is great too. You can either wear it crossbody like I had it on at the beginning of the video, or you can wear it around your waist. It is a waist pack. A lot of people I've seen are wearing them crossbody. So anyways, I want to say thank you to Tara from Creations for allowing me to create this tutorial for you. And I will leave the link to the pattern in the description box below. And I will also put it in a comment and pin that comment in the comment section. So stick with me if you would like to see how this bag is made. Let's go through the pieces for this small Louie waist pack. So I've got here, up here, is a linen cotton canvas that I have interfaced with a Decaville light. I just like how this gives it a little more stiffness. If you're going to be using a domestic machine, you might want to keep that out of the seam allowance. I have an industrial, so it's not a problem for me. So anyways, that's going to be the front of the bag, so the main exterior. And then the main lining, I have 2 of this teal colored OtterTex waterproof canvas. I have 2 strap wings. So I've done this with a cork. Here I've got 2 pieces. On the back we're going to put a zipper. So in this zip, this is the top and the bottom piece for this exterior zipper pocket at the back. And this waterproof canvas is the lining for this pocket. Once we have created this pocket, we will be cutting it down to match the rest of these. So, and other thing I have here are zipper flanges. So these go on either side of the zipper. It makes it curved, or not curved, but it makes it flow nicely on the front of the bag. I have long zipper here. It's a teal with light gold teeth, and I've got 2 zipper pulls. I'm going to have one coming from either side, so you can open it or close it from either side. And then this is the back. This is this back zipper, and I have 1 zipper pull in the light gold as well. Over here I've got my Ashtown Creations cork label. Up here I have one small piece of webbing cut as per the instructions. With this is the female end of this is a plastic side release buckle. So it's got the female portion there, there's the male portion. This is the slide adjuster, there's the remainder of the waist strap. And on this, I'm going to put a D-ring so you can clip things easily. And inside, it's a bound bag. So inside, well, partially bound. Berthed in the front part, and then the last piece on the inside is bound. So I've got this fold over elastic. Actually, I'm going to go look for my, this doesn't look like the 1 inch. I'm going to get my 1 inch, but I'm still going to be using fold over elastic. I'm using navy if I have it, preferably navy, to bind the inside of this pouch. So let's get sewing the Louie Waist Pack, small version. All right, before I start on this part of the bag, I was going through the pieces that I needed, and I realized I missed cutting one of the lining pieces for the back pocket. So you should have an exterior this size and a lining the same size, one larger, and then the top is smaller. So you should have 4 total pieces for this section. And here are a couple of additional pieces I forgot to cut before I filmed the pattern, what pieces are in the pattern. These are the base. So these are 2 base pieces. So this is the exterior and lining. And these are the zipper gusset pieces. So yeah, make sure you've got everything before you get started. I'm going to put 2 aside. You're also going to need your zipper, and I'm going to get my zipper slider out and a zipper slider. I'm going to wait a few minutes before I put my zipper slider on, just because I want to stitch it on without having to move it out of the way. All right, so I'm taking my back bottom. I've got it facing right side up, and I have my zipper tape, and I'm placing it on top of the back bottom along the longer side, and I'm going to just clip it into place. Now I'm going to baste this on with, so I've got 5mm stitch length, and I'm going to baste it on with our usual 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. And I will backstitch at the beginning and the end of the seam. Now I'm going to take my exterior back bottom piece, and I'm going to place it right sides together with this package I have. So I've got the lining right side up, the zipper right side up, and I'm placing the exterior right side down, and I'm going to clip it. And I'm going to make sure that I've got the edges lined up nicely. Now I'm going to stitch this on with as close to 1/4 of an inch seam allowance as I can. I end up having to put mine in backwards to get that as close, unless I switch out my presser feet. 3.5 stitch length, and I'm going to backstitch at the beginning and the end of the seam. I'm going to finger press this, both pieces. So the exterior and the lining, I'm going to finger press them away from the zipper. Make sure that they're both lined up. And now I'm going to top stitch with our usual 1/8 of an inch. And I'm going to switch mine to a 5 stitch length. And I'm just going to top stitch along the edge we just sewed. So now I'm going to take this lining back, so back lining piece, and I'm going to put it facing right side up, and I'm going to place the zipper package on top of it like that, trying to line up the edges across the zipper and across the sides anyways. And I'm going to clip that in place. I'm going to baste this on 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to take my top piece, and I'm going to put it right sides together with the zipper, lining up the zipper edge on the long edge and the sides to make sure that it's lined up side to side and across the zipper. So the seam allowance on this pattern is larger than what I'm able to get. So I try and get as close as I can, but it's going to mean that there is this part here ends up being larger. We're going to cut it down anyway, so it doesn't really matter. It's just, if you're following along, do what you can to get the same seam allowance as recommended in the pattern, but just know that I'm getting as close as I can to it. So I'm going to stitch this on. So 3.5 stitch length, back stitch beginning and the end of the seam. Now we're going to take this bundle, and I've got the seam allowance going to my right, and I'm just going to fold the top piece back onto the seam allowance. And I like to stitch it the other way, so I've turned mine around, but it doesn't matter whether it's to the left or to the right. You want that top panel we just sewed on to be over top of the seam allowance. Now I'm going to top stitch. All right, moved around to the table so I can show this a little better. So I've got my pattern piece. I have it template. Otherwise, use your paper pattern piece. And what we want to do is there is a zipper placement line. So you want that line down the center of your zipper teeth. And you want it, make sure that you've got all your edges in here. So when I first put it down, I had it too far over, so I wasn't going to catch enough of this side. So make sure you've got it centered on the teeth and then centered on the panel. All right, there, I think I've got it. So I'm going to take my silver marking pen and I'm going to start marking around the pattern piece. All right, I think I've got it all marked. No, didn't come out on the top, so I'm going to just put it back on. Good idea to make sure you've got all of the lines marked properly before taking it off. It's harder to put it back where you had it. So I'm just going to go around the top because for some reason my silver marking pens aren't wanting to mark. Maybe time for replacing the refill or put a refill in. All right, before I cut this out, I want to go around and I'm going to basically baste this. I'm going to go along about 1/8 of an inch away from this line and I'm going to baste around. All right, before I baste this together, I am going to take my zipper slider and I am going to put it on. You don't want to forget this part. This is very important. I just about did. So I'm going to look at my zipper and hopefully you can see it. And zipper coils go alternate so that they can actually close. That's partly how they close. So I look at my zipper and I've got the right coil on the top, left, right. That's how I want them to finish so that I have a nice zipper here. So I'm going to break the zipper apart. I'm going to place the pull on. I'm not sure it really matters which side. I just do the right one first. I'm holding it with my thumb and my middle finger, and I have my index finger on the butt end. So I'm going to put the other side in, and now I'm going to, it looks like it's on an angle, so I'm going to pull up slightly and try and straighten out the zipper slider. So push it on. Hopefully it pops, or you can feel it click. And I can see, move it down a bit, I can see that I got it on the way I want it on. The other way I can tell is that the head of my zipper slider is pointing directly at the teeth. When it's off, it wants to point up or down depending on which way it's off. The other way I can tell is the bulges on either side of my zipper are pretty even. So I'm just going to stick this in the middle for now. I am going to stitch all the way around. You don't really need to baste at the top part because there's nothing behind it. I'm just going to do it anyways. So I'm going to baste together 1/8 of an inch, 5 stitch length all the way around. And you want to make sure you at least go over the zipper and the bottom part. If you don't do the top, at least do the zipper and the bottom part. All right, now that we're done, we want to flip it over and make sure that we've caught everything. So I'm off a little bit here, but I'm not sure that's going to be enough to worry about. I can come in a bit if I want, but that should be okay, and it should get caught in the seam allowance. So I'm not too worried about that, but if you were off by more than what you need for the seam allowance, I would go back and fix it. So grabbing my scissors. Now I am going to start cutting out on the silver line that I drew. So we want to get right around that. Don't worry about following your basting stitches too much. Worry about following the line you drew, because that needs to be the same as the other pieces, both exterior and lining. The other thing you want to make sure is that you've closed the pocket on this side. The next part is we're going to construct the gusset. So I'm starting off with the main zipper and the 4 zipper flanges. The zipper flanges should have a dot marked on them. So if you haven't done that, make sure you mark the dot on both sets of pieces. And there are measurements in the instruction as to how long your zipper needs to be. So double check that and make sure your zipper is that length. And now I'm going to take my lining zipper flange pieces. I'm going to take one of them. I'm going to set it right side up, and I'm going to take the zipper. I'm going to place it right side up at the end. So I'm going to line the ends. This is the side. So this straight side is where the zipper goes. This is the end, and then this is the inside. So I'm going to place my zipper along here on top of the zipper flange lining piece, matching the bottom end and the edge. So I'm going to clip this in place. So this is what it looks like on the other side. So I am going to, it doesn't say in the pattern, but I am going to start just baste this in place. Yeah, I'm just going to baste this in place so that it doesn't move when I'm trying to put the exterior piece on. So I'm just going to flip it over and with a 5-stitch length, baste it up the side a bit to keep it in place. All right, so I have basted it that far. I did not come even anywhere close to this point. This is our pivot point. I don't want anything to get in the way of that, but I want this piece to stay on there. So now I'm going to grab the exterior piece. So I got my cork piece here. This is the zipper side again. This is the bottom. So I want the one that fits when I put it right sides together, fits with, matches, like it mirrors the one we put on the other side, the lining piece. So we want the one that mirrors it. I'm going to clip them together. I'm going to set my stitch length to 3.5. And this is probably the most difficult part of the pattern is getting these zipper flanges to work. They do work. I've gotten them to work. They just are a little tricky. So I want to sew along the zipper side, so this edge here, with the full seam allowance as per the instructions from the bottom of here up to the mark. And we are going to stop with our needle down close to that mark. All right, I've changed my foot. Now I'm going to try my best to get the full seam allowance. So I'm going to start at the end. I've got it on a 3.5 stitch length, and I'm going to sew up to the dot and leave my needle down and then pivot just the zipper tape so it comes off and follows this edge. So we want it to follow that edge after. So it will end up a bit curved, for lack of a better term, and backstitch at the beginning and the end of the seam. All right, so I'm got my needle down in the position that it needs to be. I'm going to pull my zipper tape off to the side. I might need to lift my presser foot, and there we go. And now I am going to, I'm holding the back part. I don't know if you can see it. I'm holding the back part with my fingers to keep it from flying out that way. And then I've pulled the zipper tape off in this direction so that it lines up with the edge. And now I am going to continue to sew straight up and off the point. Backstitch at the end. So it gives us a little kink in the zipper, which will help us with the curve of the bag. Do your best to get the seam allowance, because then that should help you with this part when you're stitching at the right seam allowance. So now I'm going to flip these two back on themselves, and I am going to put a clip in it. Okay, now I am going to top stitch this right along here with our typical 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Put it on a 5-stitch length, And yeah, I'm just going to go right from the edge here all the way down, kind of tugging on this to make sure I pulled it out as far as I can from the seam, the zipper as far out as I can from the seam. All right, I'm going to have to do it. No, I can do it this way. And don't forget, we have a slight curve in this. So we want to, looks like we want to get the curve, or we want it to be straight. No, we want it to be straight. All right, so here we go. I'm going to go ahead and just baste these edges together before I move on. It doesn't actually say to do that in the instructions. That was just a choice I decided to, I decided to do on my own. So now we want to put the other side on, and it's basically the same thing. I'm going to go through this. I'm going to show it, but I'm going to go through this a little faster, like speed this part up, but I will show it again. So the parts that we want to make sure we get them on the same side. So I don't want to put the other one on this side. I want it on the top side. So I've got the top side on there. I want the top side on the other end. So I'm taking my lining piece, and this is the zipper edge and this is the end. So I'm going to put that together on this end. I'm going to clip it into place, matching the edge and the end up. And now I'm going to baste this on, but it's not going to be like it's just the 1/8 of an inch, and I'm not going to go very far up like we did on the other side. Then I will add this piece on just like we did and finish it off. All right, so this one I'm going to flip it around and work from the lining side. I have my mark here, so it doesn't really matter which side you do it on. I just don't want to start with the angle. I want to finish with the angle. Needle is down. I'm going to hold the back part and then pull the zipper over and then continue up to the top and back stitch. Surprisingly, this is still a very forgiving area. It may not feel like it, but I've had it where I was really off and I was still able to make it work. It feels like, because they're such small pieces and it's such a tight angle, that it's going to be hard to work with, but I haven't found it to be, like, I found it to be fairly forgiving. I'm separating these pieces and folding them back just like I did on the other one. Before we go on any further, I am going to add my zipper sliders. So I'm get those out. I'm going to add my sliders to the zipper panel. So I want one on either side. So I'm going to do exactly like I did, putting the zipper on for the back. I'm going to check where my coils are, separate them, stick the slider on one side, holding it with my thumb in and middle finger, index finger on the back. Try and straighten it up best as I can, pop it on, and there's one. So do the same on the other side. There we go. We got two zippers, sliders on this. I really like to have the zippers coming from both sides. I found when I have a medium size, but I've used this one on a vacation, and I was able to bring the zippers to whatever side I was wearing it on. So if I had it on this side, the zippers would be up by my chest up here, or if I put it that way, then I can bring them both up here. I have a little more control than if I only had one direction that I could close it in. Now we want to, taking this piece that we just finished adding the flanges to, we want to add the other side of our zipper gusset. So we're going to add it to the free side of this zipper. So I'm going to take my lining away. I'm going to take my zipper gusset here. I'm going to grab the zipper pack, this part, and I'm going to lie it down here. If you want, I think I'm going to just baste these ends so I don't lose my zippers off the end, just quickly. All right, I basted the ends. I'm going to find the center of this piece. I'm going to take one of my silver marking pens and just a tiny little spot on that edge, so I know where the center is. I'm going to grab my exterior panel and I am going to just snip straight in. I usually like to do V's, but this one, a little slit in there is good enough. So I'm going to take my finished zipper with the flanges on it. I'm going to put it right sides together with the zipper gusset, and I am going to clip it into place. And you may have to, like I just had to curve it around a bit so that it would fit in, because this part of the zipper is a little curved. All right, now I'm going to baste this on with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I'm going to have to do it this way. I still have my zipper, my smaller foot on, so I have to get it to move through, I have to switch sides. So here we go. Basting, 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, 5 stitch length. Now I'm going to grab my lining gusset piece and I'm going to put it right sides together with the bundle that we just stitched. So I'm putting it right side to wrong side of zipper. So I've got my exterior face up, my zipper face down, and my lining will be face down. And I am matching up along the long edge, and I'm matching up the ends here because this panel should be the same as this one. So I don't need to find the centers for that. Right. Now I can stitch. I'm going to move my zipper sliders out of the way because I'm going to stitch this on with the recommended seam allowance. All right, there we go. I'm going to press the exterior and the lining gusset pieces away from the zipper, pulling on both sides, and I'm going to clip this because we are not only going to top stitch, we're going to baste around the outside of this. So before I actually top stitch this on, I am going to switch out to my regular presser foot. All right, the foot has been switched out to my regular foot. I'm going to start at the edge here and then come up, top stitch, baste, and then baste. And I'm back stitching here. I'm starting here because then I can hide my back stitch in the seam. And there we go. We have it all on. So now we are going to move on to the next step, which is adding our base piece. So these are the base pieces, an exterior and a lining. So we're going to end up attaching them to the ends. So I look like I need to cut some off. So I probably didn't trim my zipper to the right length, which is going to make this side a little off, but hopefully it will be fine. I'm just going to clean this up, trim this back so we have an even edge. And I'm going to baste across this just to hold the teeth together. All right, so we need to have our base piece. I'm taking the lining of the base piece and I'm putting it right sides up. And I'm going to take my zipper panel that we just worked on and I'm going to put it lining side to lining side with this panel. My zipper panel is a little bit more narrow than the back piece. So I am going to make the conscious effort to line up one of the sides. I can trim from the other. So I'm going to consistently line up with the flanges, the side with the flanges, and then I can trim it from the other side. So I'm just going to clip this in place. I'm going to baste this on. If you feel comfortable, take this, place it right side together and stitch it all at once, but I'm just going to baste this together. So now I'm going to take the exterior piece, put it right side together, and I am going to match up the long edges to make sure I've got that, but I also want to make sure I've matched up the short edge as well, because we are going to stitch across that with the recommended seam allowance. So 3.5 stitch length and all the way across, back stitching beginning and the end of the seam. Now I'm going to separate the base pieces from the zipper panel. I'm going to match them up, and now I'm going to top stitch along here. Now I'm going to take the lining panel again. So I've got my whole package face down. I'm going to take the end of the lining and I'm going to match it up with the other end of the zipper gusset. I'm going to again try and match this edge up, leaving any overhang on this edge because I can trim that back. And I'm going to baste it on with 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now I'm going to take so this is what I've got. So I've got lining to lining, and now I'm going to push this down in, so kind of fold it on each other, and bring the exterior to meet the exterior. So the exteriors now are right sides together. So the zipper panel we were working on is all bunched up in there now. So we've got the lining on one side and the exterior on the other. And now we're going to sew it across with the recommended seam allowance and a 3.5, come on, 3.5 stitch length. So now we want to so pull on your exterior and your lining and then push the seam allowance in and pull out your zipper panel. So you should have something that looks like that. And it's a ring or it's a circle. So now I'm going to line these up and I'm going to top stitch just like I did before. So there we have our zipper panel. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn this inside out. And I am just going to start here and baste around to the side. The reason I'm turning the waterproof canvas on the outside is so that because the cork will stretch. So this way, stitching on that, the feed dogs will help pull the stretchier fabric through. The waterproof canvas on top is more stable, so the cork will just be fed through properly. And I'm just basting 1/8 of an inch seam allowance, and I'm going to do this side, then I'm going to clean up the overhang on this side. So I'll go to my cutting table, and clean that up, and then I will baste that side too. So for now, I'm just basting this side. All right, for this section, we are going to construct the strap. So the pieces we need are our strap wings. So we need our small piece of webbing and our large piece of webbing. We also need our female part of our side release buckle. And if you want, you can add a D-ring. So if you're doing something other than the side release buckle, then you're gonna have your own way of doing it. If you're using a D-ring and a swivel hook or whatever, you'll have to install those your way. This is what I'm installing, so I will explain how I do it with this. So yes, for this section, we need these parts. So the first thing I'm going to do is fold both of my strap wings right sides together. I'm going to grab a couple clips. Okay, so one of the wings so I'm going to start with this one, and I'm going to put this webbing in from the long side, and I'm going to make sure it extends out the amount I'm supposed to on this end. We want some overhang, and I'm just going to make sure I've got that. Yes, I have that. So now I'm going to put a clip in it because this is where we want it, and make sure you pull up on your strap so that it comes through evenly. I'm going to clip there. I'm putting a clip in here, but we are only stitching this edge, not the long straight edge. We want to come here and then up. Going to do the other one first before moving on to stitching it. So for the second one, I'm going to do it a little differently than the pattern suggests. So I find it very bulky in the seam the way the pattern suggests when I'm using cork and stuff. So I'm just going to adjust it a little bit for that. So what I'm going to do is very similar to this. I am going to put my small piece of webbing in this time. I'm going to make sure I've got it overhanging the right amount. Pretty good. I'm going to clip it in place and make sure that the webbing is tight up against the top here. We're going to stitch these together again on this edge and then around this curve because we want to attach this section. So make sure you've got the right overhang and make sure you're sewing on the correct side. We don't want to do the long straight side. We want the one with the curve. All right, so with that suggested seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end of the seam, and I will go ahead and stitch both of these. Trim your threads and remove your clips, and now I'm just going to take my scissors and I am going to trim up the seam allowance. I'm not going to trim my webbing, so I'll break off before that, but I may trim down some in here. Okay, do the same for the other side. I'll do it with this one. So I'm going to turn this right side out. So I'm just going to flip it like that and pull on the strap. Try and get this corner. I have my star screwdriver that I'm going to use to try and poke it out, but gently because I don't want to wreck that corner. And then I'm going to roll the seam in my fingers and put a clip in it. Well, that looks pretty good. I do the same for the other. I'm going to clip all the edges. All right, now I'm going to take this one we just finished stitching and I'm going to top stitch. And in the pattern, she has you top stitch it around 3 times. I'm going to do that. I like the look of that. If you don't like it, just do it once or twice or whatever you feel like doing. But I will be going around it 3 times. So the first time at the 1/8 of an inch and I'm on a 5 stitch length. So I get to the bottom and I come straight up, but I won't come right up to the top. I'll be down about 1/8 of an inch, I guess, away from that stitch line. And then I'm going to come straight down to the line I sewed before, the same line of stitching where I went up the side before. I'm going to follow over those stitches all the way up till about 1/8 of an inch away from this line and do the same again. There we go on this one. I'm just going to trim my little ear there. So now you're going to do the same thing for this one. I'm not going to do it on camera. But this one, we are going to, I'll do this one off camera. This one has a few more things we need to do to it. So we need to add our female connector to it. So in the pattern, you're supposed to take this piece and you're supposed to fold it in half and put it over. It gets really thick here, so I don't do that. What I do is I'll put the female end on. So depending on which side you want. So remember when you're top stitching which side you want this on. So in the past, I have stitched on the part with the female to this side. So I should have made sure I was top stitching with the right side up, but it's okay. This one looks okay. So I'm going to work on it with my webbing going out to the left, which is the way I've worked on my other ones. And I'm going to do them all the same way. So having it facing with the webbing out to the left, I'm going to put the female piece of the side release buckle on, and I'm going to bring the webbing back on itself on top of the strap wing. And got a little bit, so on this one I've got a little bit of overlap. So I'm going to have a little bit of overlap there. Get it in, snug it in, basically. So I have quite a bit hanging off. So eventually I'll figure out how much I need to cut and won't cut as much. So I'm going to just put this here. And what I want to do is I'm going to, off camera, I'm just going to draw a line down here. I'm going to draw my stitch lines. So I want it down here, across, according to the instructions, back up, so I'll stitch a box. All right, before the air erasing marker disappears too much, I've got 2 lines. One is pretty much in line with the top stitching and the other one is the measurement away from that it says in the pattern. So I'm going to start here and come up, across, down, and back. I'm going to use a I'm probably just going to use the 3.5 stitch length. It probably will fit in a little better to stitch this on, and back stitch beginning and the end of the seam. I'm going to turn mine and go backwards because I find this the best way for my machine to do stitches away from hardware. So I've got a couple more stitches, and there we go. I'm going to turn and come down and then work my way back up and back stitch. And I'm about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. So now I want to take my D-ring and I'm going to just slide it on, and I'm going to put a clip down on this end. Now I'm going to again go off camera and measure up according to the instructions where I want to end this box. So then we're going to sew here, across, and back down. But all right, so I've added a line. I don't think you can see it, but I actually changed the measurement from what it says in the pattern because I wanted it a little more snug to the D-ring. If you've got a larger D-ring, then you may not get as snug, but I just decided this is what I'm going to do. So I'm going to start, 1/8 of an inch away from the edge of my webbing. I'm going to start way down here at this end of the wing, and I am going to sew this on. I've got the 3.5 stitch length. I'm going to keep that because it's a little stronger stitch than the top stitching. So back stitching beginning and the end of the seam, down here, across, and back. All right, so doing the end like this takes a little bit of, so you would have had 2 things of webbing if you had done it according to the instructions. So this way I've only got the 2 pieces of cork and 1 piece of webbing. I still get the female end of my side release buckle, and I get my D-ring. So now I'm just going to trim off this end, flush with the edge, and find my lighter and melt my ends. Do your top stitching on your other piece if you haven't done it already, and then we can set these aside. Now that we've done our side wings, or strap wings, we're going to add them to the back piece. Now I already know, follow the measurements in the pattern, and then we're going to place these down that distance from the top. I already know where it is, so I'm going to just clip them in place. So put a couple clips in them, and then I'll do the other side, and you want them pointing in towards the center. Now we need to baste these in place. So I'm going to make sure I'm on a 5 stitch length, and then I'm going to start at the bottom and just baste up the side with our usual basting 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. Now that we've got that done, we can set this panel aside. We're getting to the final construction. So what I have here are the gusset that we've just finished, the zipper gusset. I've got my front panel, which I have put on my cork label. I usually like it centered, but this has a nice design I didn't want to impact, so I just stuck it up there. If you're going to put on a label or a name bar or something, this would be the time to put it on if you're putting it on the front. If you're putting it on the back, it's a little late. You should have put it on at the beginning. I usually put mine on the front, so I didn't even think to tell you about it when we were doing this. I've got my front piece and I've got my 2 lining pieces. I have cut out the middle, like I've done notches in the middle of the center top and center bottom. I'm going to use my template. My templates have it. I'm not sure if all templates will have it, but there's marks down here. If not, use your pattern piece. And there's marks down here for where the gusset goes. So I'll mark both of those. So there's the sides on the gusset should match up with these spots. If they don't, I think it's more important to have it even top and bottom and then as close as you can to those marks. But we'll see when we go. The other thing, I've already marked on my centers in the seam allowance with silver marking pen on my front panel. I have marked on my zipper with a little bit of silver marking pen. Make sure it stays in your seam allowance because it won't come off of zippers. These sides, I've marked the bottom on both sides with little notches, and now I'm going to match up the side seams here and then come to the top, grab my scissors and put a notch in. I find the notch is a little easier to see than the simple snips in. I will do simple snips, but when I'm at this angle especially, I can't put my head in the shot to actually see where the little notches are, so this makes it easier. And one last thing I have to find the center of. I've got the center bottom marked with a silver marking pen. There's a few layers, so I'm not going to fold that. But up here, I can fold it. So I'm just going to fold it back like this. Again, I'm going to match up the edges. And in this case, it's where the side wings meet is where I'm going to do it. And in this case, I am going to just put a little notch in the top. So be careful when you're notching. I have cut myself. If you get the scissors on the wrong angle, you can cut yourself. So just be careful. I'm going to set these two aside for a minute, and we are going to be working with the front panel, and we need our gusset. So I'm lying my panel piece right side up. I'm going to turn my gusset piece wrong, like inside out, so wrong sides. And I'm going to follow, there's a tip and trick section in here that suggests sewing across the top and the bottom and then trying to ease it in. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to follow that method. I'm going to find my center of my zipper because we're putting zipper to the front exterior. I'm going to match up these marks and I'm going to put a clip in it and clip out for a bit to either side. So from here over on the exterior is where I am going to stitch the top, or on the top part is where I'm going to stitch the top. Come down to the bottom, I'm going to match the bottom, and then I'm going to stitch it just across the bottom. I think I just want to keep it in place while I've continued to clip the rest, and then I can come back. So I'm going to base it on changing that. So 5 stitch length, and I'm just doing across the center top and center bottom. And I'm stopping before, so it was starting to pull away from the edge up here, so then I decided to just stop my stitches. I'm going to go to the bottom and do the same, or sorry, that was the bottom. I'm going to go to the top and do the same thing. We are working with a zipper here, so keep that in mind. Now that we've got that on, I am going to start working around with the zipper and trying to fit it around the edges. So match it up around the edges and clip. I'm going to do that around all the way around and see if I can get this side. I'm going to start by putting this right on that spot. So on the gusset mark, I've got it on the gusset mark. It may need to move because I can snip into the bottom curve here, but I shouldn't be snipping into my zipper tape. So if I need more up at the zipper, then I will shift that location where the gusset meets. So as close as I can to the edge. And if it helps, open up your zipper. It helps just get things to work. See, it lies a lot better with that zipper open. Less resistance on it. So at the bottom here, I am going to take my scissors and I am just going to snip in to the gusset here about every 1/4 inch or so. And right now I'm only going up to my basting line. I'm going to see if that's enough. And yeah, it's not bad. I'm not meeting the full corner here, but it's not bad. Put my finger inside and push it out as much as I can. Now I'm going to get ready to stitch this on. You can use either a stiletto, or I'm probably going to use my flat screwdriver to help me. Like this one, actually it might be okay. It won't poke too many holes in, but if you're more comfortable with a screwdriver, go for it. I'm going to start where I left off and stitch around to where my stitches are here. So I'm just going to stitch this section. I'm going to take it out, and then I'm going to stitch the other section. See, this is already pulled away. So I'm going to do my best as I go around to pull this back up in line with the edge. But I'll adjust it when I get there. I've got my gusset up and my main exterior down. And as I go, I'm going to try and keep my gusset out of the way. And I'm also going to be pushing from the inside to try and get the edges to line up. So there may be a lot of stopping and starting. I want to make sure I've got my center marked. There we go. I'm going to actually just mark it on the opposite side. So right in there. So I can see it on the outside of my bag. Or like on this side, on the exterior side. It looks like we got a pinch. So I did pinch it here. I'm going to try and work that out. This is just the basting. So if that is your final stitch and you got a pinch, you're going to have to redo it. This is just my basting stitches. So I can open it up and try and manipulate that around and hopefully not put a pinch in it when I come back through. All right. Fold your gusset to the inside. Grab your lining piece and match up your center bottom and your center top. Center bottom, I'm going to put a couple clips in just to hold it. And center top, there. And as you work your way around, make sure that your zipper is pushed in. So I'm going to go to the sides and include that. All right. I have it here, in here now. I most likely will be moving some of these clips as I go so that I, not just removing them, but moving them around so that I can push in the zipper as I go. Yeah, because it wants to pop back out. Once I get to a spot where the zipper is and I've already stitched the part, I will put my, most likely this, I'll push it in, and so if I'm coming around it this way and the zipper starts bubbling here, I will put my screwdriver in and push it back so it bubbles up where I've already stitched. So this is the package I have. So the other thing I'm going to end up doing is something similar for the corners here of the gusset, because I don't want to sew that pinch in. So I need to manipulate that. Yeah. So going to move us back around to the sewing machine, and I'm going to be taking my time at sewing this. So starting where we stopped before, so I'm putting my needle down right where I stopped, sewing with the full seam allowance, back stitching at the beginning and the end of the seam. All right, I haven't gotten to the end yet, but I've decided I'm pulling this to, because I think I've got pinches in it. Yeah, it feels kind of pinched. So I'm going to flip it over and come at it from this direction. I'm going to try and move the gusset around. I'm going to sew with it on top. So that means I need to mark where I need to stop. So I need to stop about there, or Actually, I'm going to end up starting right about there. All right, I'm just going to flip this piece through. So I'm going to, before I trim any edges, I just want to see what it looks like. So I'm going to reach in the hole and grab the gusset and pull it out. Start pushing these corners into the inside so that it can start turning it. I want to see if there's pinches and how bad they are. If they're fine, if there's no pinches or the pinches are small enough, then I'll just turn this right side out, back inside out, and we will trim, like clip the curves on it. But I want to see how this went first. So your curves aren't going to be great, but already here I can see I've got an issue. So I got too close to my zipper there, and that side is okay. I think I took a smaller seam allowance when I did this before, so I think I may end up taking this. Well, I certainly have to take this part out because I've sewn in my zipper. I also want to see how these things are. I got a little pinch, but that might be able to be worked out there. And I'm having a problem getting into that corner because of all the extra fabric. So I know I need to go back in and fix it. Yeah, so I'm going to go in and I'm actually going to back off the stitches a bit. I'm going to go back to about 1/8 of an inch less than what I was trying to do. And because I think that's what I usually use. My zippers aren't usually that close to the edge. So I'm going to go back and do that and then fold it back through and show you what I've got. But I'm going to do that off camera. All right, so I backed it off, and as I suspected, yes, I must have used a smaller seam allowance before because I was able to get around it. I don't have much in the way of puckers. I do have dots in my fabric, but I'm really hoping when I go around, because I go around and I top stitch the whole thing. I don't just do the bottom where the opening is. I top stitch the whole thing. So I've still got a few threads to get out. But anyways, I'm going to turn this back right side out or inside out, and I am going to trim some of the excess fabric away from the seam allowance. There's not much. So in the future, if you want to try and use the seam allowance recommended in the pattern, go for it. I will continue to use a seam allowance that's about 1/8 of an inch less than what it says. So just a little bit smaller of a seam allowance. It doesn't catch, like I'm not risking then catching the teeth in my seam. I'm not pinching the gusset quite as much. So yeah, I'm going to get rid of some of these extra things. I'm going to also have to iron it a bit. So grabbing my scissors, make sure you do not cut your zipper tape. So when you go to take fabric away from where the zipper tape is, pull it back and just expose your fabric. So I'm going to pull it, and if I have to snip some of my basting stitches, it probably doesn't matter as much here. We want it to be nice, so if I have to take out my basting stitches, I do. So anyways, go around. I'll just do the rest of these. So go around making sure that you're not cutting your zipper tape and take off excess fabric. Probably in the very small seams you don't need to. Any corners sticking out like that, I will trim down in these corners. Probably should have come out at an angle because that's what it actually says on the pattern. So come around and come out. So that will help with these edges. Actually, I might just do that now. Going to put my needle down right in the last stitch I have here. So I've got it in the last stitch, and I'm just going to off the end to reinforce that opening. So make sure when you leave your opening that you are doing this back stitching. All right, so now that I've got this cleaned up a bit, I'm going to turn it back right side out, and hopefully this time we can leave it. So put my hand in and push the corners, start pushing it through the opening. And before I top stitch this, which is after I've turned it, going to be the next step, I'm going to go to the iron and give it a good press, because back and forth so much, the Decaville light has gotten quite crinkled. So I'm going to try and flatten it out a bit. The other thing I'm going to do while I'm over at my ironing table is I'm going to put a little bit of, I'm going to fold this over and put a little bit of glue. I'll turn it right side out. So this, we need to close this. I'm going to fold this over the seam allowance that I have sewn. The opening here, if you glue it shut, you put glue in it, and then we will come in and we will top stitch along this edge, and that will catch it and close it. So it's easier when this is inside out, but I can't show you as well when it's inside out. But I'm going to go iron this whole thing to get it nice and flat again, and then put glue in it and get it set. And when I come back, then we will top stitch. All right, I've ironed it and I've applied a little bit of glue along this edge to help keep it closed. The other thing that's going to help keep it closed is the top stitch along this edge. So I don't just top stitch the bottom, I top stitch all the way around. So I'm going to put my stitch length to 5, and I am going to work and top stitch right 1/8 of an inch along from the edge. I've got this turned inside out because I find this is the easiest way right now that I've found to actually top stitch it. So I'm going to backstitch. I will backstitch at the beginning and the end of the seam and go all the way around. Since this is rounded, I will be moving the bag up and around. I'm not going to try and sew it with everything just flat. And as I come around by the zipper, I am slightly pulling the zipper away from the exterior and the lining pieces. Got little bits of glue. I'll try and get that off later. So while we, top stitching across here has closed off this bottom seam. So now we can turn it right side out and zip it up and take a look at what we've got. So it looks pretty good so far. Right, one of the things I missed when I finished thought I was finished the back section is I needed to place my lining piece. I need to place it right side down and my back right side up. And I am going to just baste these two together. So I'm going to make sure that I've got it lined up. I'm going to put a couple clips in the corners to make sure I've got it all lined up properly, because we need it on before we can attach it to this part. We're going to attach it to here because we're binding it. These need to be attached, and I missed that part in the instructions. As long as I don't miss this part in the construction, we're fine. So I'm just going to go through and baste this on 1/8 of an inch seam allowance all the way around. It's time to put the back together with the front. So I've got my pieces here, my back pieces here without my webbing is all attached, and I've got my lining piece all attached. So now I'm going to take it and I'm going to put it right sides together with the front. So I'm just going to grab my scissors and got a notch here. I'm going to make sure I got the notch on the front side too, just so it makes it a little easier to match up the centers. And that one's got one. All right, so I'm going to go and match the center of the bottom, and I'm going to clip. I clip towards the gusset because I'm going to be sewing with the gusset side up. So I'm going to go and clip here, out here a bit, turn it around and go to the center top, and put some clips in it. And if you notice, I have my gusset open. It helps take off some of this tension on the gusset, or on the gusset when you open up the zipper. So it makes it a little easier to come around. So this side should be a little bit easier to put on because we are not dealing with zipper tape where we can't trim it. So if we need to clip into the gusset on this part, then we need to do that to make it fit. The other thing, according to your pattern piece, your gusset markings, I have transferred mine to the back of my back piece, and I'm going to use the gusset join here and put it at that mark. It may get moved, but that's where I'm going to start trying to line it up. There's a lot of bulk right in here. It is a thick area, and then I'm going to put a couple more in. All right, so going to put some snips in, and I'm only going to put them, I'll put them about every 1/4 of an inch, and I'm only going in right now, I'm going in between 1/8 and 1/4 inch. And so yeah, clipping into the gusset part. Okay, then I'm going to push it down, push my finger in, push it down, and try and match up the edges, clipping as I go. Do the same for all the corners. I'll go down and do this one. I usually put my finger in between where I don't want to clip and where I am clipping, so in between the gusset and the piece. And if you're doing the smaller seam allowance like I am, you don't have as far in that you can notch. So remember what seam allowance you're using. You can do it a little bit further if you're following the seam allowance in the pattern. I'll be doing it at that about 1/8 of an inch less than what the pattern calls for. All right, sewing this on, I'm going to start probably at the bottom. I was thinking of starting with 1/8 of an inch, just sewing it around at 1/8 of an inch and then coming back. And for the bottom part here, I'm going to sew it at the regular. If I get to the corners and I can only do like the 1/8 of an inch, I'll do that, and then I'll come back and add the extra seam allowance after. But do the best you can getting around these corners, moving your gusset out of the way. I'm starting on a straight area, which is easier to start on. And I'll backstitch in the beginning and the end of the seam. And use my stiletto or my screwdriver if I need to. Having problems getting up onto some of these strap wings, so I'm taking this fabric that I got with my machine and using it as a hump jumper. I ran out of bobbin thread, so I'm going to just add my new bobbin, finish this off, change my bobbin, finish the seam, and now we're getting ready to put the binding on. I do have some spots that it wasn't able to get out to the edge of the piece, so I'm just going to trim it down because I've got 1 inch binding, which if you do half and half, you got so a 1/2 inch on either side, and you want to make sure that you can cover everything. So I'm going to go around and look and see where I have excess sticking out and where I can trim it down a bit so that we can have the best chance of covering our stitches. Our sides here, if you look at them, they're very thick here. And then, yeah, so this is where you would have it even more thick if we had if we'd done the webbing double on itself here, we would have had a lot more thickness right here. So I'm going to go around and try and trim this up. All right, I've trimmed it down. And now I want to take my fold over elastic. I have some navy blue 1 inch fold over elastic. And I'm going to wrap it around the edges. I am going to start, I'm actually going to start at the bottom. I sometimes start at the top. With this pattern, you can see inside quite easily at the top. And I want to hide my join the best I possibly can. So if it's inside at the bottom, people are going to have stuff in their bag, so it's less likely to be seen. So I'm just going to, in this, I don't know if you can see it, in this fold over elastic, there is a center It's not really a seam, but it makes it look like it's a depressed area in the center of it. So that's about halfway through your fold over elastic. So I'm going to run that line all the way around, trying to center it on my seam here that I'm covering. And then I'm going to pull it a bit as I go, cleaning up threads as well as I go. Pull it slightly so that it will conform to the edge a little bit better, because it'll be less sloppy, but you don't want to over pull it because then it starts to pop up. Even when you've turned the bag, it will stick up. So go around making sure to pull the fold over elastic if that's what you're using, or if you're adding waterproof canvas as you're binding, go ahead and apply that all the way around, making sure that you've got it fairly even on both sides, and clipping as needed. So now I'm down to where I want to overlap the joint. So I'm just going to cut it a little bit past. I'm going to fold over the end, and I am going to try and get it over top of the one that we've already got in place. I'm going to try and get it evenly, and hopefully it doesn't. The ends of this fold over elastic do fray. That's why I'm folding it, but the edges don't. All right, so I've got this here. Now I'm going to put a little caveat in here. I can get the binding on, but I am not the best at sewing it on. So take it for what it's worth. I am going to swap out my thread and try and find a navy thread because I don't want my stitches to show. All right, I've changed my thread out to a navy blue. I'm going to start stitching, and I'm probably going to start at the top. Going to do it with the gusset side up, and I'm going to do my best to stay, well, between 1/8 and 1/4 inch away from this edge. Yeah, so hopefully I catch everything underneath as well. Now backstitch at the beginning and the end of the seam, and I am using a 3.5 stitch length. Take your time and move your fabric out of the way as needed. Try and keep the binding on. All right, it doesn't look like I actually missed sewing any of the binding. It's not straight, but that's why I used matching thread so that you can't really tell. So I'm going to turn it right side out and make sure that everything looks okay. It needs to be worked out a bit, but otherwise, and ironed, but otherwise I think it looks good. Nothing gaping inside, so it's a good sign. All right, so this is what we have. I'm going to move us around to the table so that we can finish off the strap. All right, now we are going to put the last little bits of this strap together. I apologize for the voiceover. I had some technical difficulties. So now we want to add the slide adjuster to the webbing. We want to make sure that we get it put on the outside of the strap. So I'm going to follow the strap all the way down. Going to grab my slide adjuster, and it kind of bows in it, and we want to make sure we get it going the right way. So I'm going to put it up the left side, bring it over the bar and put it down on the right side, slide the adjuster down the strap a bit, make sure the strap stays flat. I'm going to then grab my male portion of the side release buckle, and I'm going to put the end up, so the end of the strap up the left, down the right, so that it goes over the center bar of the male part of the clasp. I'm going to move the male portion of the side release buckle down a little bit, giving it a little bit more slack that I can work with. So now I'm going to feed it up through the slider. So I'm pushing extra fabric through, or extra webbing through. I'm going to slide it up the outside and bring it back on the inside of the center bar, fold it over, and then clip it together, making sure that I have not twisted anything on the way. And we're going to sew across with a couple lines of stitching to finish that off. So we want to check our strap, make sure everything's okay, make sure that join is hidden. You want to test a couple times to make sure that you've got the right pieces connected, and you should be able to move it freely. So anyways, this is the Louie Waist Pack. It's a small version. It's the cutest little thing. They are so addictive. So hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please consider giving it a like and subscribing to my channel. And yeah, we'll see you in the next tutorial.